Hello, Frog fans. Welcome to Postgame Beers podcast. We are the Lupton Drinking Club. Thanks for listening. Thank you for joining us live on YouTube tonight. If you're here with us, hit that subscribe button to Lupton Beers. We'd love to hit those likes as well. Keep that live cast rolling. We've had a lot of fun just trying this out over a couple weeks. I'm your host, Kyle Malloy at YLMK, joined by my co-host, Jacob Sailors at JD Sailors. We've got a full crew tonight. Crazy Ray Cartwright, our producer. We've got Martin Guerrero, Sultan of Stat, and we also have our uninformed horse, Garrett Evans. Jacob, before we jump into the success of Horned Frog volleyball and soccer, which we'll dive in deep tonight.
Let's go.
Joining us on the live feed tonight is a very special guest, a friend of the LDC, and to most of our fans of purple and white, right? Parker Fleming at Stats of War. The coolest nerd that you know, likely already following him and his advanced stat previews. If you've watched any of his Bet US TV shows, they're very informative on breaking down a lot of the college matchups that are coming up that weekend. Parker, first, thank you for joining us tonight. And instead of plugging you at the end, I want to make sure that I didn't miss anything and what you're doing, all the work that you're putting in around college football.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks for having me, guys. I know we tried to do this, I think, a little bit ago, but I'm glad we could make it happen. And I'm Bet US on YouTube Tuesdays and Wednesdays at noon Central. And then Twitter is where you find all the other stuff, the previews, and then a show for the Hammer that happens here and there. The Twitter is the best place to kind of find all that.
So before we jump into the game itself, obviously the game that no one wants to talk to, it's a funeral of sorts. Your work has picked up extremely over the last, 6 to 12 months. You're not just diving into TCU, but you've kind of strayed away and jumped into all of college football. And you've got other stuff happening, in your life as well. I mean, you're a busy guy.
Yeah, it's crazy. Life was a lot more fun when I was just like procrastinating grad school stuff and making graphs, and now I have to do stuff and take care of responsibilities. So it's a little bit more of a trade-off. But yeah, it's been fun, man, and I've been appreciative of people sharing my work and asking questions and offering feedback and how stuff has grown. It's been pretty cool.
Are you still in an undisclosed bunker in the mountains somewhere?
Well, if I confirm that I have a bunker, then a little bit about my post-apocalyptic plans. So I can't really tell you that. But yeah, I'm out here in the mountains. It's nice. It's pullover and shorts season. It was like a crisp 40 this morning.
Oh God!
So it was pretty nice.
Are those mountains blue? Are they the Blue Ridge Mountains?
Like on my beer can.
Dude, they're no, I'm rocky. I like the big mountains, not the fake mountains out east. So I'm out here in the west.
What kind of hobbies have you picked up out there?
Well, we do a bunch of hiking, kind of outdoorsing, just that. I like to fish, but honestly, I like hiking to cool fishing spots more than I really like standing there fishing. So most of the time we end up doing a bunch of hiking. We've got we don't do snowshoeing because that's kind of laborious and lame, but we have they're called the crampons, the little micro spikes that go on your shoes. And so we'll go, do something in hip deep snow in the winter, and that's a lot of fun. So we do a bunch of hiking. A bunch of college football has become a hobby because I've got the full-time stuff now going on with Sumer Sports. And then as always, I try to go to the gym most days and do a little powerlifting. So that's a good winter hobby. Nice. When it's cold as shit outside and gives you a reason to leave the house.
So my dream vacation is to go to the mountains for 2 weeks and just hike from lake to lake and catch my food along the way. I'd probably die after day 3. But
the problem is if you caught enough food, you'd probably get eaten by bears for that food.
That's true too.
It's kind of a trade-off. Yeah. We've done a couple overnights that have been a little sketchy of we're freaking out here. But generally we do day hike stuff because I'm a basic bitch and want a cup of coffee and a nice dinner on the same day that I do a hike. So
yeah, I went to Lake Tahoe last year and I told the story of going hiking on my own, which mistake number 1. But once I got up, I got about a mile and a half up the mountain. I couldn't hear the highway anymore. Man, I never felt so vulnerable in my life. Nobody cares that, I have a job or a family. These predators I could feel their eyes on me. And I hightailed it back to the road as quick as I could.
I have a friend who is a big mountain biker, and the other day he sent us a video. It was he took a 40-minute video. He only sent us a little video because he was riding and a mountain lion crossed the path 500 yards in front of him, and he was like, "I'm dead. This is it. My life is literally over right here." So he just sat there and filmed and was just like, maybe someone will at least see what happened to me and watch this mountain lion pace around for a little bit, and then 40 minutes later wander off. Dude, yeah, it's crazy. Just crazy.
Die for the RTs and the faves.
Yeah, that's right. All right.
Fellas, we got some ball to talk.
I guess.
So let's jump into obviously the Frogs versus West Virginia. I went to rewatch the highlights of the game. I got through the first half. Frogs were up 21-14, and the craziest thing happened. The video just stopped. There was nothing existing after that in the second half. So I can only presume that TCU pulled it out and won the game with an easy W. No, we all know what happened next.
MK, would you be surprised to know if I would have told you going in, TCU would get 1 yard, in that third quarter? Would you have called me crazy?
I would have called you crazy. That's crazy Ray Cartwright right there.
You can't get 1 yard in a whole quarter without a whole bunch of negative plays. And those negative plays came from the offensive line, but that's just my bitterness kind of coming out there. Go ahead, MK. You're in rhythm.
That's all right. Frogs put up 100 yards in the fourth quarter, but unfortunately nothing to show for it. Do we want a dramatic reading of the TCU drive chart in the second half?
Okay.
I think we need that. I need that. Do we
have
sad music?
Second half only, right?
Here we go. Second half only.
This is so bad.
Here we go. Punt, miss field goal, end of game.
That is just.
Those are not just missed field goals.
Parker,
Those are field goals that were kicked dang near into the center's ass on those attempts.
So, Parker, let me ask you first. Have you ever seen a worse half of football from TCU? We've had some thin years, in the late Gary Patterson era, or maybe back in the 90s. I don't know how far back you go with watching, but where does this rank as far as putrid performance?
Yeah, I think it's important to contextualize because I remember 2019 West Virginia, where at halftime, the TCU lined up like they were going to go for it and try and score. And then they called a timeout and kicked, and people were booing, and TCU ended up losing that game. It's been dismal before. I don't know if this was the absolute worst. But man, this season for TCU, you knew it was going to be a step back, right? That's what happens in the Big 12, right? You're good when you're at the top of your development cycle and you get the breaks. And then the next year you're worse. We've seen it happen to Iowa State, to Baylor, to Oklahoma State, basically anyone who's not Oklahoma in the Big 12.
Okay. Can I stop you right there though? Because the reason I didn't want to allow that to be such a deterrent for my optimism is because of the transfer portal. And I feel like that can fill in a lot of gaps with that development cycle theory. So what do you think about the effect of the transfer portal on the development cycle?
I think that there's a couple limits that we've seen to the transfer portal that are just kind of inevitable realities. So one of them is that there really aren't good tackles in the transfer portal. If you can't develop tackles, you are I almost said the F word. Sorry, I don't know what we're saying. We're screwed.
No,
you're screwed.
That's required here.
And so that I think is really important to know. Kind of like you, JD, out in the wilderness, no one's coming. If a bear eats you, you're done. There's no cavalry coming to shore up a bad tackle situation if you can't develop them. And we know that TCU's offensive line development cycle has just been abysmal, just awful. Freaking Guyton is starting in Oklahoma, and TCU couldn't figure out how to get him on the field or get him playing like that. That's just insane. So one, offensive linemen, especially tackles in the portal, just they're not real. Two, transfers up are always better than transfers down. A guy transfers from a lower situation to a better situation. There's a signal in that. That means that he's outplaying his performance. He's going to step up, and he's going to be likely to be better.
Okay.
The guy's leaving Alabama. There's a reason. If he was good, he would be at Alabama. And that doesn't mean that those guys can't contribute at all, but that does mean that if this was a legitimate dude, he would not be transferring from Alabama. And frankly, he wouldn't be transferring to TCU. Last year, TCU got some really, really good transfers up. Amani Bailey this year, filled in like that, like great example of guy who transferred up from a good situation in Louisiana to a better situation at TCU is doing great. But this year, I think they thought they could kind of cheat death here and grab some of these drop down guys and fill in holes. And some of them were just absurd. Like Tommy Brockmeyer was a favor to his dad and a way to just bump up the recruiting ratings for kind of posterity. No one expected him to actually play football for TCU. But then like JoJo Earl, it's like, hey, maybe he could fit in here and work, but it's really hard because those guys transfer down. You can't fill a need as immediately with those transfers down like you can the transfers up. Like think about Mark Perry last year coming in. I mean, TCU's defense last year doesn't work without Mark Perry, and we see he's in a little bit of a different role this year, and it's a little bit harder.
Newton.
Josh Newton, exactly. You've got to have guys coming to a better opportunity. TCU, I don't know whether it was greedy, I don't know whether they missed out on guys and took what they could get, but they went for drop downs, and I think that they are seeing that you cannot just plug and play these drop down guys in as easily as you want it to be. It's not Madden, right? It's not NCAA 14. You can't spam the transfer portal till you get your guy and then go win a national championship.
So that's really interesting. So you bring up that point. Now I got to call myself out because I'll look at guys transferring out of TCU and they'll end up at like Arkansas State or whatever. And I'm like, oh, that's the best they can do. Then we won't miss them. But then we get guys from Alabama and I'm thinking, oh, hell yeah, let's party. We got Alabama guys. And it's like I'm biased both ways. You know what I mean?
They're from Fort Worth. They're coming home to play.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So I'll keep that in mind next transfer cycle.
It's just important to do that. Like there is a reality. There are certain positions where you can go get a guy, but then like it really just comes down to like if Nick Saban didn't think this guy was useful, either he's a knucklehead, or he's unhealthy, can't stay on the field, or he's not good.
Yeah.
Parker, I also, that reminds me of a conversation that we had, about a month or so ago about locker room chemistry with these transfers. And you kind of see where with TCU, just the chemistry's felt off with this team a little bit this year, and how, a bunch of transfers can kind of disrupt that locker room chemistry because they haven't been in the trenches going to war, for years.
Good point.
Yeah, it's kind of like a mercenary situation, and I don't think that you can't build culture in spite of that. I think it's a harder task, and you've got to get guys to buy in. Sometimes I'm worried about like kind of the counter effect of like to try and build culture, you get guys to try and proclaim there's a stronger culture, and they end up saying all this hollow bullshit they don't actually believe about #brotherhood and all this stuff. We're like, dude, I don't freaking know that guy. Like we see each other practice sometimes. I've never talked to him. I don't know who it is. And so like that might have some issues overall. And like, I'm sure, I don't want to say this on air, but like, I'm sure you guys have heard the soft stuff about specifics in the locker room. And I think that that's all totally believable. I can't speak to any of that like specifically, but I think it's very true to say like, there's not a clear leader in the team. And part of that is just, hey, you lost your clear leader. Like you lost Max Duggan, you lost D Winters. Like that's just the reality of it. You can't fill those guys, immediately, but then also even the guys who are kind of around that would step up, Hodges, Shad Banks, those guys haven't been here the entire time. Those guys are transfers as well. And so you bring in all of these guys who have, all their different baggage, whatever, who are all in the transfer portal. And I'm okay with this, because I think that they should give the opportunity, but in the transfer portal are a lot more concerned about how is this going to work for me rather than I'm actually going to go buy in and do something. And I don't think that's unique to TCU in any stretch of the imagination. But yeah, so I think that it's a lot different of a problem than we saw. And while I think that TCU has tried to be progressive with how they embrace the transfer portal, they might have overestimated the extent to which they can kind of cheat the development cycle reality of the Big 12.
So they kind of intimated that during the press conference after the game. I mean, didn't they ask a question about where is the leadership? I don't know if that was a direct hit at Chandler Morris, but it was kind of like who is actually stepping up in the locker room. And I think we can all assume Josh Newton is that guy on defense. But at the same time, if you're not, when you're not winning games, you don't have those awesome highlights, from the video department afterwards to show us like what's happening in the locker room. We have to make assumptions. We have to pretend that we know what's going on, and we have no idea. But all that to say, who is the guy? Like, who is that one guy that's going to bring the team together and go, no, this is my team, and we're going to win this game?
Yeah, well, and even I don't want to play Degrassi high here. Like we can keep this short, but like Chandler Morris was taking a picture with Garrett Green during the alma mater after a loss. Like that's twice now that they haven't been over to the alma mater and like doing that. And so you're just like, oh, that stuff doesn't matter because they all just transferred to TCU and it's just kind of like they're just playing football somewhere. And part of that I think is like naive college me being like they're not, they don't care about whatever. But like part of that is that probably reflects a little bit of buy-in. I think just a little bit.
Yeah. Well, so let's, I want to pull up your chart, your advanced stat preview, hashtag CFB graphs from the West Virginia game. And let's just talk about first based on your numbers and kind of how these numbers work with each other. What surprised you? What by the numbers say, okay, this worked out the way the numbers show? What was good? What was bad? Just a general conversation about the game. And while I was vamping there, I could have been sharing my screen. So.
And once again, I'm not going to speak for you, Parker, but these aren't projections. And so I want you to kind of talk about that. People get really upset when they see numbers and they don't benefit their team. I truly enjoy. I spend a lot of time on Twitter, truly enjoying all the interactions that you get of people just so pissed off when they see a number that says something bad about their team.
And also real quick, I just want to say shout out to those who are joining us live on YouTube. So if you are with us in the room, you can follow along with the screen here. You can also watch this on YouTube as well. We post these after we record too. If you're listening on audio, we'll do our best to kind of keep you guys in the loop of the conversation. So Parker, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'm not selling picks. I don't like that. Like that's just one thing I really try to avoid the appearance of doing because that's not what I'm doing at all. And so I try to go out of my way to be like, hey, I'm not a tout. I'm not telling you that like, hey, these are going to be good. I'm like, hey, I want to talk about games and think about games, and this is the best way for me to do that. So, looking at this, I think a couple things stand out that are really, really straightforward. One, let's look at the very bottom there. You've got third and fourth down success rate on the TCU offense, West Virginia defense. TCU's been 50% on third and fourth down success rate. And I lump those together because they give you credit. If you go for it on fourth down and get it, I just give you a 1 over the denominator of third downs, right? So it's like, hey, did you just convert at the end there? TCU's been 50%, but West Virginia's defense has been really good at that as well, 29.4. TCU was at 43. They were 7 for 16, I think it was. And so we saw some regression from TCU's third and fourth down ability just based on West Virginia being pretty good there.
Kind of landed in the middle of those two numbers, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at some of TCU's drives when they had to extend them, especially late. Like you've got a first down at West Virginia's 24 and you go backwards. You've got a first down at West Virginia's 25 and you gain 9 yards and then you run the ball and can't convert there as well on 2 plays and then a 3 and out at the end of the half there where, first down and 10, you go backwards again to third and 13. So I think the early downs play of TCU was actually pretty underwhelming, and that put them in a position to be in some of these bad third and fourth down situations, and so they converted worse. Those things go together, right? The other thing that stood out that I think is just a problem and kind of a known is something that you knew was going to happen with who TCU brought in to run the offense, but like they're terrible in scoring positions. This season so far, TCU has been 8th at creating a quality possession. A quality possession, affably, I call it an ECHL, is a first down inside the 40 or a big play touchdown, right? Mm-hmm. And TCU has been 8th in the nation at creating those. West Virginia, 56th in the nation at preventing those. And so you'd expect TCU to get a lot of opportunities, but TCU's been abysmal, 3.84, that's 69th in the nation at finishing those drives, whereas West Virginia's been 34th in the nation at preventing those finishing drives. And that's really what it came down to. TCU had plenty of opportunities, and they squandered them. They could not, when the field got short, it's a combination of a couple things. The field got short and they don't have Quentin Johnston, and that makes things very hard, right? It's way easier to have the big man and know exactly where it's going to go. They don't really have the solid connection of, like, last year, Duggan went to Tay Barber when things got bad. Like every game, stuff was going crazy. And then he's like, let me just find Tay for a big gain and then we'll keep going, right? And they really don't have that option there, even as much as they try to go to Jared Wiley in those situations. It hasn't been amazing. He wasn't really involved at all in this game. And
that surprises me how teams can take him out of the game. Because
you would
other
think
games
that you'd be able to either scheme out of that or take serious advantage of the extra attention on that.
Well, in some games he looks like Travis Kelce, and then other
Right.
games he disappears. It's really frustrating because I want to be Jared Wiley's number one fan, but when he disappears in a game like this and you lose by 3, that's super frustrating for me.
Yeah, 1 catch for 9 yards.
It's kind of absurd that like you have Jared Wiley and Imani Bailey and you still can't score in the red zone. Like, throw it to the big man or run it, or like RPO pop pass every time and just make them decide who they want to defend. I mean, obviously it's not that simple, but things get crowded when the field gets short. I also think that TC's offensive coordinator got entirely spoiled last year by having KJ Jefferson to bail him out. And so much of what we saw in the West Virginia game was effectively him being like, all right, I just need Chandler to make a play. And if Chandler can make this play that he hasn't been making all night, then we're going to be fine here. And I really just feel like there wasn't a lot of innovation to kind of, or tailoring rather, to what Chandler Morris can do well. And so that's where you see that number where TCU had, I don't have this number offhand here, but they had what? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 trips into the red zone, at least scoring opportunities. I don't know if all was in the red zone. And they got zero points from it. That's the difference between this 35-28 and the 28-21 we saw, or 23-21 we saw, 24-21, excuse me. I can say random numbers. But that's the difference there is like, just on average, you'd expect the team to score more when they have that many opportunities. And TCU has just been so dramatically underperforming there that my model really hasn't caught up to them about how poorly they're underperforming there.
Okay, so let's use that as a good segue because one thing I wanted to bring up as far as the TCU defense goes, I've been betting the under in a lot of these TCU games because it feels like the numbers early on are overly punishing TCU for that Colorado game. And it feels like the numbers haven't caught up there. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, well, and pacing issues with the new clock rules are very confusing, I think is a good way to say that. And we haven't totally settled on an equilibrium there. The reason you bet an under on TCU is one, absolutely just that kind of crazy frantic pace certainly sticks in people's minds a little bit. But also, I think that TCU's lack of finishing ability just really, really limits their ceiling. So even if they get the opportunities, and even if it's one-sided, we're going to see a game that's more like Houston, 39, 49 total points, 36-13, than kind of that, 52-7 Oklahoma Lincoln Riley style kind of blowout.
Yeah, I guess just to be clear, I was talking about our defensive performance from the Colorado game and that carrying over into projections for the other games. But I think our defense is way better than that Colorado game, and that's been the main reason I've been betting unders game totals.
Yeah, I think we were thinking that they were going to make a change maybe mid-season after the Colorado game. And it's helped that they've played a couple underwhelming teams on defense, but also like good defenses make bad offenses look bad. And we're not going to they didn't get burned against SMU. They really didn't get burned against stupid stuff against Houston generally. And so I think the defense normalized. Part of you wants to say, you're right, transfer portal and we didn't have film on Colorado, so we didn't know what it was going to do. Like, you could give all those excuses, but also, what offense does Sean Lewis run? Do you guys know this offhand?
Hand it off. I don't know.
He's Brile Street. He runs the freaking veer and shoot.
No,
they knew exactly what it was going to look like. There's a ton of they should know exactly what it's going to look like. So like getting caught off guard there was just like they didn't prep for it. I have no idea, but So I think that a little bit of, again, you got some familiarity with your opponents. You got a worse quality with some opponents, and obviously like Colorado, had it's kind of like the Boise State in 2008 or whatever it was, when it was like they would play that Peach Bowl game every year against some random team and they'd beat them a lot of the time. And the knock on them was like, oh, you have all off season to prep for this one game. But you can't do it week in, week out. That's kind of what we're seeing with Colorado, right? Like they just prep for TCU, kind of knew what they were going to see and had, Travis Hunter kind of caught everybody by storm there. So I think the defense has settled and normalized nicely. You see in this graph here, they're in the 40s or the 30s, excuse me, like almost 40, for defensive efficiency. And for this week, they moved after that West Virginia game. Well, they moved back to 55, but some of that is because, it's connected nodes throughout the season. And so it alters, but yeah, they're not, they're like bottom half of the Power Five, but they're not like abysmal. I don't think it's great, but it's decisively worse than last year. I don't know. What do you guys think about I just think not having D Winters and not having the athletic freak that is Dylan Horton to bail you out of situations has really, really exposed some cracks in the foundation there.
Defensively, right?
Yeah.
Defensively, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was really, you bring up D Winters, and I was really hoping Jonathan Bax could jump in and fill some of that gap, but I don't know if he's been on the field at all. So that's been kind of disappointing because then you're left with, Jamoy Hodge and Johnny Hodges, and we know their weakness from last year has been, covering running backs or tight ends in the slot. But I know Obi Azor has done a good job too, right?
He's filled in, but he's not as dimensional as Winters. So he's 89.2 tackling grade, but he's a 60.3 coverage grade. If you go to Winters last year, he was. It's loading. That's perfect. Why is he not here? What the hell? There we go. Well, he was okay. Well, that might not be fair to compare. That's great. I will say that I disagree with PFS assessment of D Winters' abilities because of where he was put, but he was at like 57. So I will just say,
priors?
I will say like Obi Azor can do like half of what D Winters could, but also doesn't have like the field general kind of like, hey, here's what you need to go do. Like, hey, Johnny Hodges, fire hydrant. I need you in this situation. I need you here instead of over there. That kind of stuff. I think they're really lacking the glue on that. So those two guys, I think, are really just a big kind of alley that's really hard to fill. And that's like normal development cycle stuff, right? Your hope for TC's defense is they get better over the course of the season. That's your best hope, and we've already seen some evidence of that.
But I think we have seen that, right? The Colorado game was a huge failure, and then all of a sudden they don't give up a touchdown to Houston, or they give up one to SMU. West Virginia was a fine performance, and so I think there's a little bit of confusion. I think on me, a TCU fan, saying the defense is not the problem, right?
No, I think against the Colorado game, it certainly was. Even though I will say, I mean, I don't think that's hot take to say the offense left points on the board against Colorado that could have bailed TCU out and they just couldn't do it. But no, I think the defense is normalizing against kind of mediocre competition, which again is what you want to see. I don't think they were as bad as the Colorado game. And aside really from, Texas and OU at the end of the season, they're going to have a lot of opportunities to just not let mediocre teams be great. And that's going to be enough down the stretch.
Can I just bring up one thing from this season that, I've been really, really pleased with?
No.
Go for it. It's your podcast. I'm here.
I was waiting for an answer. It's Hell's Half Acre Stadium goods. I've been wearing this hat. I didn't wear it to the last game because of the blackout, but I wear it proudly on every podcast. I wear it a lot around town. I wear it to most games. And I'm over here at hellshalfacresg.com right now, Parker, and I'm seeing some new arrivals that are new from last week. We got this Big Uglies t-shirt. Hopefully that'll motivate the guys going into Iowa State this week. How about this? Hey, Martin, what do you think about this Panther City t-shirt? All black with the Panther City script.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm going to buy it right now.
Okay, yeah. And if you want to be like Martin and you want to pick up these new arrivals, go to hellshalfacresg.com. All right.
Hey,
can I ask a question about something you said earlier, Parker? You mentioned that Jefferson for Arkansas, he bailed KB out a few times. Do you? I don't know if you can dive into that. Was he running the ball more, or was he just actually converting on those 3rd and 4th downs more than expected?
Yeah. So a little bit. It was kind of both. Like he's a freaking missile. Like he's like what I wanted Donovan Smith to be is what KJ Jefferson is. And so much of what Arkansas's success last year was Jefferson drops back, goes through a read. It's not there. I'm going to make something happen. Like you saw that there's really good in the A&M game where like he threw it. It was like double slants, just very standard kind of play. And he threw it into like super tight coverage and goes over the sidelines. And he's like, just run it. Like no one's there. You can just run the ball. And so he's so athletic, he can kind of get away with that. And he's experienced enough to have the kind of the processing through all that. So I think that's important of it too, to make your first read, make your second read, and then say, hey, I can bail out here. Whereas Chandler, like I I think it's entirely underrated that Chandler Morris has not played significant, meaningful football in what, 4 or 5 years, like a really long time now. And when he did, I'd love to remember the Baylor game, but the Oklahoma State game the next weekend happened. Like we very clearly saw that, like there, it wasn't some kind of like ascendant. Hey, this is going to be amazing. It was really like, hey, this is a raw quarterback that is a work in progress. And it stinks because he's like, what? He's like 22 at this point. I mean, it's a little less than like 2019 Max getting murdered, where we're like, hey, trust the process. Like he shouldn't be starting right now, whatever. It's kind of like, I mean, you're a grown man. You gotta figure this out, but you need some help where you can't rely on him to make this elite processing and physicality. Not to mention, you can't rely on him to take the hits that KJ Jefferson could last year. Like he's a little guy, and that's not a knock on him. Like he could still play football and be good, but he cannot run this kind of bludgeon offense there. So it was less like decision making in terms of the play calling, and more so the processing of Jefferson and the physical tools of Jefferson that papered over. Like, hey, I don't have to get as nuanced in how I craft this game plan, because I know if stuff hits the fan, we're still going to get 5 or 6 yards most of the time because KJ is going to be able to do something with it.
Okay,
Parker. Talking about that 3rd and 4th down success rate and Chandler Morris and all that, TCU was 5 of 6. They started the game 5 of 6 from 3rd down. And then what did they finish? 16 of 7? That's what flipped. They had so much success early, with Chandler running that same offense. But then, and then they're going against, scrubs from, the 2nd and 3rd string of West Virginia, because they were dropping like flies in that second half. They couldn't generate any success whatsoever.
Yeah, well, I think really in the second half, we saw kind of how the O-line was limiting. And again, they just couldn't really figure out how to navigate some of those issues. But like you look at the first drive, I mean, Chandler gets sacked and you're at 2nd and 13, and then he gets sacked again and it's 3rd and 19. Okay, drive's over, right? Like immediately there. The next one, I think golly, I can't remember this one. The next one, I think he was pressured and threw it away. And then the second one, he tried to hit Wiley and it was low, and then they punt. Like, and so you start look at this. I think really West Virginia. So what West Virginia did, oh gosh, what was it? Not last year. Last year's 22, 21 was, remember in the second half, West Virginia was like, hey, we're going to stop the run with 3 guys on the line and 2 linebackers. Like they had 5 guys in the box and were able to just stop the run. And so you can drop at that point, 6 guys in pass coverage and double bracket QJ, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's kind of what it was. Here was kind of the opposite, where they were like, and a little bit, Colorado did this in the second half too. And they said, hey, I think that we'd rather stop Imani Bailey and bring some pressure and make Chandler Morris beat us. Yeah. And so there's kind of the decisive shift there to shift and say, hey, we're going to take away the run. And then if you pass, we're going to bring, we don't feel like your guys can match up one-on-one against us enough to exploit this. We're going to bring pressure, and we're going to make you pay for it.
How concerning is that for a TCU fan whenever you see their O-line just get whipped as bad as they did against 2nd and 3rd string guys?
And then you're playing Iowa State this weekend? Yeah, I would be very worried. That's very concerning. I think that there are known commodities. I don't want to say players' names, but there are known commodities on the offensive line that they don't have better solutions for, who are not good. They're not good enough. And you could paper over it when you had a super strong interior offensive line, but when you have Johnny Walk-On playing center because the transfer guys you had can't play every down, you've got some issues. And that's really where they are right now. I think Jacob DM'd me the other day. I was like, is it player X? And I was like, well, it's player X, but it's also player Y. Like there's just some very clear weak links here that are just not doing super well. I'm trying to look at,
and then where does player Z fit into that too? I mean, player Z's probably been just as bad.
I forgot. I lose track of who is who. At one point, I had the because I have like the good tracking data and stuff, or not tracking data, but like player level data. And there was the identifier. It was like 1689, or it was like 4 randoms. It was like his player ID. And Grant and I would just text each other those 4 numbers every time we did something dumb. And we're like, yep, that's it. That's it right there. Looking at, I was trying to look at PFF specifically in pressure to see. I guess they don't have this by half, but Morris was pressured on 33% of dropbacks and completed only 36.4% of his passes. So I mean, just not great there. And again, 4 of those pressures turned into sacks, and sacks, relative to pressures is really kind of a QB stat. Just in terms of, can you get rid of it or can you create? And so it's definitely the offensive line giving up a lot of those, and then the quarterback not being able to kind of handle those as well. Cause they weren't like the vintage TCU offensive lines, where it's like, hey, a guy ran up the middle and just destroyed everything and there's 3 linemen on their ass. Like, it was just like, hey, he got beat on the edge and the guy's in Morris's face.
Well, I thought Chandler did a great job of bailing them out at SMU, and I was kind of concerned going forward because I rewatched that game and went just play by play and saw a lot of guys where a lineman was standing there blocking a ghost while a linebacker or a defensive tackle came running free right at Chandler. And Chandler's throwing off his back foot and completing a pass. So I guess you can't count on that every game.
Yeah. And again, like, if you're struggling with SMU, you've got Iowa State, you've got Texas, you've got Oklahoma's front has looked pretty nasty. West Virginia, I think both sides of the line was a little underrated coming into the season there. So yeah, I mean, all of those are completely valid in terms of, if you struggle with SMU, you're going to have a bad time later on.
So I want to go into Iowa State here, but first we have a couple questions from the comment section. So Tentakill Rex wants to know, what prehistoric critter should TCU fans identify with more? The Eurypus? I tried to read it. Europs or Ankylosaur? Ariops. There we go. Ariops or the Ankylosaur?
Do we know what either one of those are?
I'm going to guess one's a lizard, one's a frog. That's my bet. My context clues are telling me that.
I really don't want to Google this on the show because it's not great content.
Let's just have this as a little nugget for next week, and we can. But, Tyler asks a little more digestible question here. He wants to know, Parker, what is your background? And however much detail you want to go into that.
My headboard and the 2 lamps and this old Western painting I found on the side of the road in Fort Worth.
Your background as far as
I think he meant that. I just thought it was funny to do.
Maybe he was talking about it. Maybe he's talking about your cool blue light.
I can see the mountains in the painting back there.
I want to know more about that blue light.
Yeah. It really helps with my producers for Bet US maybe do it because it's.
Well, I tried.
It just looks better.
You see my background?
Yeah.
I'm trying with my TV light.
These are like $5 light bulbs at Lowe's, man. They're like the LED, whatever. But yeah, no, I was a religion major at TCU and then went and taught in middle school because I thought I was going to save the world. And then was like, actually, I want to do math. So I went and got a grad degree and took I took no math at TCU, none. And so I took like 9 math classes while I got a master's in econ and then went and got a PhD in econ. And now I do data science for a company that works with NFL teams to make roster decisions.
Sick.
Hey,
okay.
Parker,
and I post graphs on Twitter.
Before we move off of this game and the O-line play, and you talk about developmental cycles specifically to this O-line, how much of it is still on the old regime as opposed to the new regime?
I think we can answer that in an interesting couple of ways. How good would the offensive line last year and this year be if Garrett Hayes was a guy?
Yeah.
Right. How much would TCU be? I'm just looking at names that haven't panned out, which isn't totally fair, but I think it's fine. I can say whatever I want. Yeah, you've got Dotson didn't pan out. Who's the other 4-star? Garrett Hayes. And the Mike Nichols is not doing great. And so I think that, I think that you're still like the top of your cycle is pretty thin. And that's going to be the guys before you. Because I would project that on, I think ideally what you're doing, and the transfer portal might change this, but what you're doing at offensive line is sophomores are filling gaps when guys get injured and then they're starting their junior and senior year. I think that would be my ideal with a college football program. Maybe a sophomore beats out a senior who's being lazy or whatever. But generally, it's like a 2 to 3 year kind of lag. So I don't know if Ricker and Dykes are able to do anything with the offensive line that's going to be different. Next year would be the year I'd kind of see, hey, is this going to pan out? Although, like, who's currently on the roster? I don't really know if they've done a great job with that. It's always easy to recruit really good skill positions to TCU, but they've always struggled. Think about the great TCU defensive linemen. They've all been transfers for the most part, or they've been, Jerry Hughes, who wasn't a defensive lineman. And so I think that TCU really, really, really struggles with kind of the trenches. And I looking at the recruiting classes, I'm not, certain that they're making huge headway, but if they were, I wouldn't expect to see the fruit of that on the field until 2024 at earliest, but probably 2025.
I think that kind of speaks to the numbers game in general, right? Like you would expect there to be less offensive line, high school talent, defensive line, high school talent than there are skill position players, right? So like if you're a highly rated recruit, you're probably going to Texas or Texas A&M.
Right. And what I can do with you, if you're like a 185-pound little water bug, I can put you in my offense and make sure you don't get killed. If you are a 275 kid who hasn't hit puberty yet and got long arms, I can't put you on the field, right? Like I got to pump you up for a couple years. And so the gap between the on-field readiness of that kind of like fringe 4-star, 3-star talent that is so prolific at Texas and that 3-star, like fringe 3-star lineman means like, dude, you better eat a ton the next couple of years. Whereas fringe 3-star fringe 3-star skill player means like, hey, you're fast as heck, or you've got amazing hands, or you have one good trait, and we can use some of that. But you can't partially use a lineman like that.
Now I know he was converted, but you saw that with Dylan Horton, through his development cycle, right?
Yeah, he moved every year. He played safety in high school. Every year of Dylan Horton's career, he played a little closer to the ball. I think that's so funny. Just constantly getting bigger and moving closer to the ball.
So let's go ahead and go into the Iowa State game. And again, I'll pull up your advanced stats preview so we can use that as the guide for the conversation. So just kind of tell us, what can we expect from this game based on these numbers?
Yeah, well, one, I didn't realize it's like the Jack Trice legacy game. So throw it all out the window because I think they'll be hyped for that. Yeah, well. But what I'm looking at here is, and kind of, I won't do like the full nerd explainer. I'll do a video of that on my Twitter if you like want to get into like the deep stuff here. But kind of vaguely, offense. So if you look at the offense and defense under the logos right there, TCU's 22nd in offensive efficiency. They're 55th in defensive efficiency. Iowa State 73rd and 62. So actually kind of evenly matched, but generally college is more in college, offense is more predictive. And so Iowa State being that much worse on offense is really what kind of contributes to an 8-ish point gap that is kind of the baseline expectation for what I'd see between these two teams. Iowa State, notably, super inefficient in the passing game. They're 111th in passing success rate. But EPA, which is kind of explosiveness, they're 54th. Rocco Becht has looked okay once they've kind of figured out, like, okay, we don't have Hunter Deckers. What are we going to do? I thought they'd bring in the big kid, JJ Cole, and I thought that would have been funny. But Becht has been fine. They're kind of air raiding it out a little bit and flexing. They got that guy from Northern Iowa who's actually a pretty good offensive coordinator in there. And they haven't been able to hit those successful passes consistently, but they've been able to break off a big one every now and then, which is at least signs of life. One thing that's going to really, really stand out for TCU here, Iowa State's offense is much better against the rush than the pass. 49th in rushing success rate, 40th in EPA per play, explosiveness allowed on rushing. TCU, you can see 18th in EPA per rush and 37th in rushing success rate. We know that TCU needs that rushing floor, right? They need like a minimum threshold of ability to run to be able to make this offense work. And Iowa State is not going to be as simplistic as, oh, fewer guys in the box, that means we run. More guys in the box, that means we pass, which is a lot of what the veer and shoot is kind of at its fundamental level. And so that Iowa State's ability to kind of muck up the run game is going to put a lot more pressure on those late downs, on those third and fourth downs, where it's going to be, third and long, and Chandler Morris is going to have to make a play. Historically, Iowa State's secondary has been really good, so it's not an excellent situation for TCU. So just looking at a couple of those stats there, kind of expecting Iowa State to muck up the run game, force and try to capitalize on maybe some turnovers in the passing game for TCU, and then an offense Iowa State's just hoping to catch a TCU player out of position and break off a big one enough to stay around, so that a defensive touchdown might be the difference for them.
Parker, that sounds very similar to the West Virginia game plan.
I think West Virginia might be more competent on offense.
I wouldn't think passing.
Definitely, yes.
Even passing?
Well, they don't have that. Yeah, there's no pass game. I love that West Virginia just had to pass once every 3 or 4 plays. They just had to throw an incomplete pass to sacrifice to the gods so that they could keep running the ball. You knew it's going to be incomplete.
Hey, Parker.
Yeah, but I think it's, yeah.
Question. If I'm looking at this graph, and I know this is not the right way to look at it, so I want you to tell me why it's not. But if you look at any individual statistic, TCU is above Iowa State in every single one of them.
Lots of blue versus lots of red.
Why is that a faulty measure of success in terms of the outcome?
Well, it's not in terms of total. I mean, and so it does correlate. Like TCU, 68% win probability, almost 30 projected points to a 30% win probability for Iowa State and almost 22 projected points, right? So like it does bear out like, hey, generally the team that's better here is going to work. One answer that's really easy is outside of the EPA margin and passing and rushing EPA, the rest of these aren't opponent adjusted. Specifically, because I think it's a little too granular and you get a little too cute and you reinforce your priors a little too much. If you opponent adjust, like passing and rushing success matters so much on when you choose to run and pass. And so it's not necessarily like, hey, your opponent matters and I can objectively adjust the quality there. It's a little bit more descriptive. So one of that is there are some differentials between rushing and passing. Like Iowa State's offensive numbers, they played Iowa and they lost their starting quarterback. Like they looked shitty. And that's just the reality. And so they're going to be way, way down there. If I adjust those, it's like, hey, I'd expect an average team to kind of look like that against Iowa. So that's why, for instance, their offensive EPA looks so much higher than their offensive success rate because it's adjusted for opponent. So one, there's that. Two, there is this idea that like the pictures of the game fit together in different ways. So how I generally consider the game is, and it's kind of how this is broken out here, is like, all right, your run pass selection matters. How often you create quality possessions and how well you finish them matters. And then how well you do on early downs versus late downs matters for how sustainable you are. So if you look at it in those boxes and you kind of see some mismatches where, yes, TCU is super dark blue on offense, but then look, very bad at finishing drives. Iowa State's actually okay at finishing drives. Or early downs EPA. TCU kind of bad on early downs. Iowa State actually pretty good on early downs. And so you can see how those puzzle pieces kind of fit together a little bit. And so that's some of the granularity there that translates to, hey, TCU super dark blue. Why aren't they winning by 50, right?
Gotcha. We had a good question in the chat, kind of not totally related, but similar from Damon. What's an unpopular analytics opinion that you have that the rest of the analytics community may disagree with?
An unpopular opinion I have that the rest of the analytics company disagrees with.
If you change that to the rest of the community, that would be an easy answer.
Yeah, everyone hates my opinions. I don't know. I have some weirder ideas about like, I think there's some idea about how there's two big ones that stand out. One, there's not like empirical evidence that play action affects, like the run game affects play action.
Yeah.
But I know it's true. I know it does, right?
Oh, really?
Empirically, you're like, okay, it doesn't. But I can definitely manipulate what I can do in the play action game by how I run the ball. That's almost like trivially true.
But let me ask that question a different way. If I didn't have a run game at all, play action would still be effective, right?
Yeah. No, extreme corner case, right? Like extreme, like your running back has no feet and is just running on little stubs, right? Like, no, there's no credible threat of the run game. I'm not worried about it.
If I had Colorado's run game, I could still run play action effectively.
It depends on the quality of the linebackers that you're playing, and it depends on what kind of credible threat you can throw. So play action would probably be still effective as a mechanism there, but I'm saying that you can affect play action, the quality of play action, by the quality of your run game. Which there's no empirical evidence for, but I think I believe that. The other one would be, I think that some people are talking about defense as like a series of processes and that like longer drives are better because it's like more probability for the defense to screw up. And I think some of that is kind of rooted in like time of possession thinking, where if I'm a defense, I really don't want to give you more opportunities for an explosive play. So I think my weird idea is some people believe that the more plays an offense has to run on a drive, the fewer explosives they have, the more you can kind of make them gain shorter chunks more often, the more probability for like a turnover. And I think that there's a trade-off there where there's actually a higher probability for an explosive play that's not well understood. So I don't believe it's as easy as more offensive plays means more likely things can go wrong.
Yeah. So, with that, talk about Eckel a little bit, because I heard you say in a video that you kind of use that as a semi-replacement for time of possession. Do I have that right?
Yes. Yeah. You see at the bottom of the stats
sorry.
preview, it's like the Echo ratio or whatever. It doesn't have to. You don't have to pull it up.
Okay.
But the Echo ratio, I stole it from hockey because I steal everything because everyone steals everything. But like hockey has this Corsi stat. And one, Corsi was named after a coach that has a great mustache. I named it after the fullback on the Navy team that had the longest drive in college football history.
Nice.
And so what time of possession tells you is how long you held onto the ball. What the Echo ratio tells you is how much of the game's quality possessions you controlled. So it's kind of like, what did you do with the ball more than how much you held it? Because the game that really taught me about this was like the 2019 Duke's Mayo Bowl was like Wisconsin and Wake Forest. And Wake Forest doubled up Wisconsin on yards, and Wisconsin beat them by like 30 because literally Wake Forest had like 42 minutes of time of possession, and Wisconsin beat the hell out of them because Wake Forest just turned it over like 6 times, just handed them the ball at the 30. And so, of course, like total yards is going to favor Purdue. Time of possession is going to favor Wake Forest is going to favor Wake Forest. But Wisconsin won because they just scored on short fields because they were so bad. I was like, all right, there's got to be a way that we can think about this and it's better of time of possession. So it's just the idea of like, did you create a quality possession? Did you use your drive well or did you not? And then we can look at a rate on offense. We can look at points per quality possession on offense and defense. And then we can look at a ratio to kind of say game control. So TCU's 39th in game control in terms of opportunity creation and opportunity control. Iowa State is 87th. So that's another metric that would go into the model and kind of say, I expect TCU to create more opportunities than Iowa State, which is, even if they're less efficient, would mean maybe they're going to score some more points.
Okay. So before we get you out of here, can you do about 10 more minutes? Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's totally fine.
Okay. What do you project for TCU going forward for the rest of the season? Like I honestly, when I hear you do your preseason previews with Grant, I think you guys are a little too pessimistic on TCU. Maybe trying to balance out some of the purple tinted rose glasses or whatever people say.
Yeah.
But yeah, what is your going forward? Like, can we turn this thing around and have a 8-9 win season, or are we looking at just get bowl eligible?
Okay, so like last year, I think I said 8-4 was like an excellent season, and sure it was. Yeah, it's great. But I think like 7-5, 8-4 this year with the turnover TCU had is like great in the scheme of building a program, and so that's kind of my baseline expectation for this. The good news is that no one is good in the Big 12 right now. Like you've got legitimately left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 winnable games. That's Iowa State, BYU, Kansas State, Texas Tech, Baylor. Those are all like you arguably could and maybe should win most of those there. So let's say you get 3 of those. We're looking at 6-4. Splitting Oklahoma and Texas is super optimistic, I think, for this team. I think that the way the Big 12 shakes out this year is that it's Texas, big jump, Oklahoma, big jump, everybody else. And I would say that, again, 7 feels like a pretty successful campaign here. 7 is Iowa State, BYU, Texas Tech, Baylor. That feels like the minimum, honestly. Like if they don't get those 4, you're kind of like, shoot. Oh, I like these from Kelly. Yeah, this is fun.
So I don't know how much you agree or disagree with him, but
he will come on this podcast. You guys should ask him if you haven't.
Oh, yeah.
He's great. He's a great guy. So looking at the schedule, he has some win probabilities here, right? I haven't looked at these in detail, so I don't know 100% what these are.
He's got us winning 3 more, kind of, we'll say for sure, and then a 50-50 game with Texas Tech. So that gives us 4 more wins. That gives us 7 wins for the season.
Yeah, that feels about right because between OU, Texas, and Kansas State, we're and Texas Tech, we're looking at over 1 more expected win. So 4 feels like pretty, like if they don't hit 7, given what's already happened and given who they're playing, something had to have gone wrong. That's them losing to Texas Tech or Baylor this year, which is rough in my opinion.
That is rough. I had them personally at 10 wins, and you can call me a homer or whatever. But hold on. If we're sitting at 5-0 right now, which I think we agree we should be to an extent, right? Like West Virginia and
certainly,
Colorado
certainly could be. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, yes. All right. With the talent advantage we have, we can figure out the roster coming together and new offensive coordinator. We can figure that out as long as we have talent. And that's what I was leaning on. So 5-0 plus another four wins. And then I'm thinking we could steal one against either Texas or Oklahoma. That puts us at 10 going into the bowl.
Well, if you're 5-0, then you just need Iowa State, BYU, Texas Tech, Baylor, sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of Kansas State, Texas, Oklahoma. Which again, I think so. Look at Kelly's numbers. So we add those up. I don't want to condescend to anyone, but add that up. 32% plus 22% is 54%, plus 12% is 66%. So it's like a 2/3 chance that you win one of those games.
Yeah, right.
That's 10. That's not insane. I certainly wouldn't have projected it, but it's not insane given the way things broke.
No, that it's a little homerish, but I don't think I'm not saying we're going to go undefeated.
I think it's best case scenario, on the table. Absolutely. But clearly, I mean, like the thing for TCU is that they did a couple things really well. They screwed up 2 games that they probably should have won. They did not screw up the 2 games that they had no business losing in Houston and SMU. If they'd have dropped one of those, it would be kind of like threat level midnight here of like, how did you lose to that team?
Yeah. I just think
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're straight. That's all I was saying. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, I think I've shifted into it's a beat your rivals season, not win the Big 12. Beat Texas Tech, beat Baylor. Maybe we beat Texas. No matter what the projections say, we beat Texas. So that's not crazy. And for this year, at least, I'm going to include Kansas State in there. So I want to win those games.
Yeah, and I think BYU is a team that you're way better than, and you have them at home, not in Provo, and so that should be a pretty solid win.
Yes,
so
but we've already lost. We've already lost a game that I thought we really should have won in West Virginia. So if that happens again, I'd rather it happen to BYU and not Baylor.
I think if you get to 7 or 8, you're looking at Texas Bowl versus an SEC team. That's fun, right?
That could be A&M.
Hey, can we flip Jacob to around the Big 12 a little bit?
Sure.
So going back to BYU, and I want to pull up, if you can, Parker's Did You Get Beat That Bad?
Parker, we reference this every week on the podcast.
That's great.
So. Hey, this is the wrong week, Jacob, if you can find the one for I don't know.
Oh, sure is.
Week 9 from last year. That's amazing.
Yeah, I didn't have it sorted by latest.
I find this fascinating because it tells us a little bit about what really happened or what should have happened, maybe what should have happened. And BYU ends up beating Cincinnati 35-27 in their inaugural Big 12 game. Yet they are on the far left-hand side of this graph. Parker, can you describe exactly kind of what we're looking at and what that means for that game?
Yeah. So what this graph is net success rate. So success rate is how often I improve my value on a given play on average, right? And it's offense minus defense of the winning team here. So the losing team is at 0 all the way across the axis. Winning team's above or away. Winning team is away from the central axis there. And so what this kind of tells us is in the down-to-down business of playing football, how well did you do? And what this tells us is how much of the rest of the game involved nonsense, not stuff that's not repeatable, fluky stuff. That's going to be extreme big play touchdowns. That's going to be special teams. That's going to be turnovers. So if we look at the BYU game, they pick 6 on the first drive for Cincinnati. So immediately that's the equalizer, right? Because they won by 8. But yeah, so kind of the equalizer there. And then they got this last drive before the half. BYU stole a possession and stuck one in the end zone there. 23 yards, 24 yards, 22 yards. Those all just count as one success, but that's 7 points right there on 3 successful plays. So outside of what this graph kind of tells me is Cincinnati actually moved the ball pretty well. The negative of the interception only counts as a 0 in that binary yes or no success. And so that's where BYU got some points. And then BYU, they had 3 successful plays, but they were huge, big plays that got them a touchdown, kind of an extra possession there. And so maybe suggested that there was some like contextual, non-recurring stuff that is influencing that win. BYU's been on the negative side of this twice now with Arkansas as well, where just again a team shot themselves in the foot playing BYU, which is why I have them pretty low in the power ratings, honestly.
Yeah. So we're looking at TCU and West Virginia. For those who aren't seeing the graph, they're pretty much overlaid each other on the graph, like right in the middle. So that would tell me that it basically came down to a coin flip.
Yep. And so like special teams plays are not factored in this. So like TCU doesn't even get failures for the missed field goals, right? Just saying like, hey, you created the opportunity and then you stalled out. So I don't even care what the result of the field goal was. And so it's saying like, hey, you guys played about the same on average, and then some breaks went your way and some breaks didn't. And I feel like that's pretty accurate representation of what happened. And
now what we've been talking about in relation to this graph in the last 2 weeks is TCU against SMU and against Houston. They were, I think it was about 0.16 net success. And then like they were up here at 0.2 against Houston.
Yeah.
And they didn't have a game last year where the margin was that wide. So
yeah, so the decisive wins, which is nice to see, like a team being better than who they should be, decisively.
Yeah, and so that just really surprised me that we go from 2 games where we absolutely kick ass to just laying an egg against West Virginia. And I really would like to see what this graph was at halftime.
Yeah, well, hold on. Can you vamp for a second?
Yeah, and another thing I was going to add too was.
Do you want me to share my screen? Let's do that.
Yeah. You can go ahead.
Do you guys want to live code? Are you okay if I live code for a second?
No, sure, because I was going to bring up another point while you do that. So there's been a lot of talk about. Can you share your screen? I'm not even sure. Oh, I didn't stop sharing. There we go. You should be able to now. Down at the bottom, it say present.
Oh yeah, present. Here we go.
Yeah, there you go. And then you.
I want to see the halftime, or actually.
I'll save my point for.
I want to see the third quarter of when Central Florida is up 35-10.
Oh my God, that's another game.
Versus.
I don't know. Okay, I don't know if this is gonna let me share. Let me do this by half though, really quick.
Hey, if people stuck with us this long, they can wait 30 seconds.
UCF now 0-2 in the Big 12. Welcome to the Big 12, fellas.
Dude, what the freak was that game,
Dude,
man?
None of the 4 new teams have won a game against against everyone else.
Yeah,
against
right?
the legacy
BYU. Yeah.
Where is the?
I thought Houston was going to do something fun, and then they clammed up. In
Well,
second
they
half.
did, but then they remembered they suck. Yeah. I don't know if Dana's going to make it, man. That stinks.
Yeah.
They're in a bad.
So
way
we had a question last week. Which Big 12 coach gets fired first? And they said either Campbell,
Neil Brown,
Gundy.
That was on the table.
No, it was Campbell, Gundy. I almost said Gumby.
Gumby.
Campbell, Gundy, or Holgerson. And I think they actually said Aranda too, but we threw in. I don't remember who we threw in, but yeah, those 4 coaches. We were discussing who would get fired first. Do you remember where we landed?
I thought we landed on Aranda, but then he pulled this, thing out of his ass in the last minute.
I don't know if that's going to save him, though. That's a fluke.
Man, I don't know. I think Baylor beats Texas
This weekend
Tech
matters.
this weekend.
This weekend matters. I kind of got some vibes about that. All right, in the first half, BYU had a 0.35 success rate, and Cincinnati had a 0.448 success rate. TCU 0.475 in the first half. West Virginia 0.420. So that would have been 0.055. So if you look at that graph.
So let me pull that back up because
they'd have been way that way. Yeah.
Yeah. And they just freaking fell apart.
That way. Yeah.
There we go. So it would have been probably over here somewhere.
Yeah, right in between SMU and Georgia, I think is about where that would have landed.
And that
in the first half.
That would have been, and that kind of is in line with what we saw the last couple of weeks. So just a really, really just heartburn second half, especially the third quarter.
Yeah.
All right.
An abysmal second quarter. Yeah. Golly.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about this because Martin and I were texting about this before the season, and that is all the chatter about, well, TCU, they lost all these close games last year, so that automatically means they're going to lose close games this year. First of all, I don't agree with that, and that's fine. You can tell me if you agree or disagree, but Martin said the reason why it's not going to matter isn't because it doesn't correlate or whatever. It's because TCU just won't be playing in close games this year.
Okay, I like that energy. One, that was very like Ricky Bobby. Like, first off, I disagree with that. Two, yeah, I think that I think people conflate the skills of winning close games and being in close games. Yeah. So like Matt Campbell, very good at getting in close games, not good at winning in close games. So like when they won those games in 2020 and we were like, what the hell's happening? Yeah, we expected them to regress the next year because we knew they weren't that good. So getting into one-score games is a skill, and it is going to be the case that in some of these, that TCU is either going to be demonstrably better than their opponents. That's going to be Houston, SMU, BYU, probably Texas Tech and Baylor.
West Virginia.
But even then, they couldn't do it, right? They couldn't get into the one-score game. So I think I would think of it less like when I'm thinking about regression, because it's real, right? Regression to the mean. I have an average baseline for what I expect. If it's way this way, then in the future, I expect it to be a little bit lower, right? That's just fair. Regression to the mean doesn't mean I expect it to go the opposite way. So like if you're 6-1 in one-score games one year, I don't expect you to go 1-6. I expect you to go what? 3-4, 4-3. I should have done an even number, so I could have done even there. But I expect you to regress to the mean, to kind of average, not to go the exact opposite way. So that's really, really wise. In addition, kind of looking at like, hey, TCU won a one-score game against Texas last year. Do I expect them to lose a one-score game against Texas this year? Doesn't matter. I don't expect them to be in a one-score game with Texas this year. So that's kind of different. Yeah.
So the reason I disagree with it is because of our friends at the Gambling Gauchos. I'm sure you know them. Maybe. Oh yeah, maybe not. They were talking about Texas Tech playing in one-score games, and they brought up a stat that in the last however many years, the teams with the best records in one-score games are Alabama, Georgia, on and on and on. And then the teams with the worst records in one-score games are, ULM and so on and so forth. So they're saying if you're good, you can win one-score games, and it doesn't automatically seesaw just because you played in one-score games in the previous year.
Yeah, but I don't care about it at the tails, right? If you think about a distribution, like normal curve, high school stats, right? I care about actually in the middle a lot more than I care about the tails, because you're right. Like ULM, perfect example, App State this weekend. Like ULM was somehow in that game, had no business being in that game, but they couldn't pull it out because they're bad, and App State survived, right? On the flip side, Alabama, USF, like Alabama pulled it out. I don't think it ended up being a one-score game, but Alabama pulled it out because they're a lot better. And so at the tails, it doesn't matter as much. What I'm interested in is in the Big 12, where it matters. Baylor, Oklahoma State. Like, go back and look at the one-score record of the non-Oklahoma Big 12 championship teams of the last couple of years, and you'll see it's mostly among the guys who had, sufficient talent. It was the ones who got lucky with the one-score games. Like you can't sit here and look and be like, oh, the bazooka was a replicable skill that TCU could win multiple games with by the time breaking out there. Like, that had as much to do with Dave Aranda shriveling and not going for it on fourth down as it did the TCU, having that play there. So I think that there's a lot that goes into it, and regression to the mean is super real. And one-score games matter a whole lot more for teams that were uncertain whether they're good or bad than it does, the teams that are obviously good or bad.
Okay. So we're going pretty long on time. So I want to give Martin and Garrett a chance to jump in if they so choose.
I'm good. Thanks for coming on, Parker. This was amazing. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm glad we got to meet in person at Colorado. That was very fun.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. How was that? Like, did y'all crush some brews,
I think Ray yelled at me across the parking lot, and we walked over, and Martin was there, and he was like, "Hey, I'm Martin, Salt in the Stat." And I was like, "Oh, what's up, man?" So it was cool,
Yeah,
that's cool.
Oh yeah, I agree, Parker. I really appreciate it, man. I feel like I've been kind of sitting here listening to a college lecture about college football. So it's been great.
Can you imagine taking intermediate macro from me? It's probably the worst experience in these kids' lives.
Every time I see an advanced stat preview and you talking about it, I feel equally super dumb and also a lot smarter afterwards. So I don't know what that means, But
that's my sweet spot, baby. That's it. It's like, hey, we're dumb, but we're gonna get there. You know.
It's
Yeah, I
funny.
like
So when me and Parker will do, or I hop into space with Parker, it's like in the Olympics, if they said, every Olympic sport should have an average guy competing against. So you got Parker, the Olympian, and then me, the average guy, just to show how much more knowledge Parker has than the average football fan.
I just like this when we're cooking. Like my favorite space will be like, and I haven't been doing them consistently this year, but like we'll be like some redneck dude will just get in there and start talking ball. And I'm like, I don't know who this guy is, but sure, like that's great, man. I love this.
That's awesome. Well, go ahead and plug your your stuff one more time.
Plug your stuff.
Follow me on Twitter at Stats of War. Go follow at Sumer Sports on Twitter. That's way more NFL stuff, but we're doing some cool stuff over there. And if you like play fantasy football, Sumer Sumer Sports, Sumerians that discovered math. Go over there. That's like NFL stuff, and we're doing some cool fantasy football stuff. You guys are interested in that? Some cool NFL eval kind of stuff that's really, really fun and has been challenging for me, honestly.
All the fantasy football help he could get. So
I'm competing well this year. So,
dude, heck yeah. So we're doing like a bunch of really cool stuff over there, and then BetUS College Football Show on YouTube. It's Tuesdays, Wednesdays, so we'll be back tomorrow noon Central on YouTube there. I'll tweet out the link if you have trouble finding it. It's a lot of fun. Like the chat in there is absolutely wild. It's like recurring characters, and they talk to us and we talk to them and they talk to each other. And it's just a whole lot of fun. And with Gary and Kyle. So check that out as well. It's audio form wherever you get podcasts as well. BetUS College Football Show.
And that's a good way to get questions answered. If you have a specific question about maybe a game or an advanced stat, question, not on Twitter, but actually jumping on the show, kind of put it in the chat.
Yeah, because we do like a Q&A at the end of it, and we'll go in depth on some stuff as much as we have time. So, I think that's the better way than like replying or quote tweeting. Because this isn't a flex. I'm just like ADHD too. I just can't keep up with everything that's on Twitter now. Just there's too much of it for me. And so, if you really want a game, like I'm going to give priority to those there. So.
Well, as soon as you get that next 5,000, Twitter followers, you're going to really feel something inside, But
I upped it to 10. I upped it to 10 more. I said 40,000 this time. Once I get 40,000, then that hole in my heart will finally be filled.
We appreciate We appreciate the service you do to educate us fans. Thanks, Parker, for coming on.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, Parker.
Take care.
Thank you, Parker. Take care.
Go Frogs.
All right, MK. Ray said I have to get better at dismounts on podcasts. So since you're here, I don't have to get better at that tonight. So
do you want to end it tonight?
No, I don't, because Ray said that's a skill I need to develop. So I need time, in the gym with that skill. So
it's always like the car crash.
Do you want me to finish it off, or are we okay, Ray?
I think we're good.
Yeah, I don't think people's brains need to unthaw.
Dude, we have another hour of content that we could go into.
But you know what? I do like that we approach this game from a completely different angle than the other pods. I enjoyed the other pods, but
this is totally different than what I was expecting to talk about, and I'm glad because it was way more fun.
Oh yeah.
It's like just to let somebody else talk about it, and I don't have to say shit. It's awesome.
Ray, you might want to throw a disclaimer at the beginning, just to let people know if you want to listen to it on audio, go for it. But it's probably a lot more fruitful just to watch this one on YouTube when they get time because of all the visuals. So, but yeah, go ahead and let's get out of here. MK, what do you say?
Oh, are we still recording?
Yeah, we're still recording.
We're still live.
Our live viewers are dropping like flies, but we're still recording.
Fellas, we've got
a peek behind the curtain of how the sausage is made on this.
Yeah,
my curtain. Hey, fellas, we've got Iowa State on Saturday night. If the Frogs win, whether comfortably or not, we may not learn a thing about it because we should beat this team. But we'll be back next week to talk about
Jack Trice, baby.
Let's go. Did we get beat that bad chart? I'm going to pay attention next week because I really want to see TCU at the top on the right. So thanks for joining us live. We really appreciate you guys jumping on. And if you're just here on audio, we appreciate you too. Follow at Lupton Beers. We'll see y'all soon. Go Frogs.
Go Frogs.
Go Frogs.
Go Frogs. And the sad thing is,